Yes, I am doing this. I am going to custom Echo. I've been planning on doing this one for a very long time, and I do plan to do every Skylander eventually. That includes all the very rare ones. I've actually already done the big three. I've done Robo twice. I did Wildstorm. I got lucky with Wildstorm because he was given to me at a significant discount due to him not working in game. I got a Wildstorm that doesn't work in game. So that one I customized. And then Chompy Mage was actually pretty easy. I simply customized a Jingle Bell Chompy Mage, and that does count. My goal is to customize each character, not every repose, and not necessarily the original version of the character. So I've already knocked out the big ones. Thankfully I did Robo before he was $500. And Echo was actually one I've had for over a year to do. I got my original Echo. This is not my original Echo. I have her in my collection. And I got her early on when I started collecting because I instantly fell in love with this design. This is such a gorgeous dragon. I love her so much. And when I first got her, she was expensive in the eyes of 16-year-old me for $40, and holy crap has she gotten more expensive since then. I definitely did not buy this one at the $120 price she is at right now, but regardless of value, that doesn't mean I can't add value by painting her. And the thing with Echo here is, as gorgeous of a figure as she is, there is so much detail that is washed out simply by having this solid color base. She's only got about 2 big colors with the majority of her body, minus her eyes, her ears, and her headphones here. Which, yes, her horns kind of double as headphones. She's a musical dragon. It's a very fun concept. But black, dark teal, and then, let's see if I can get my lighting a little better here. There we go. Problem is, it's gonna maybe. I'm worried about shadows. I'm trying to get a good quality video for you guys here. That might work a little better. I'm gonna have to take it nice and slow, so you guys will get the time-lapsed version. But yeah, I have some fun color ideas for her. It's not gonna deviate too much. I actually did take a lot of inspiration from Mother of Pearl. This is showing a lot of gray here on camera. You guys have seen Mother of Pearl, I hope, before. And it is the inner lining of a lot of cephalopods, so clams, oysters, all of those shellfish. They have a lining that hardens, and I forget what all the materials it is, but it's the same stuff made out of pearl, which is why this is called Mother of Pearl. And the way it refracts light creates a rainbow. I am going to imitate this a little bit in her fins, but otherwise I just have some fun blues and pinks I want to do with her. So I hope you enjoy seeing this custom process of Echo. So I'm going to try narrating over top of the time-lapse here and explain what all I am doing. Now, please remember that this is a time-lapse, so what you see happened at 1/5 of the speed. Much, much slower. If you want to try customizing Skylanders, you have to take your time. And I also cut out a lot of the drawing steps where I decided to let the figure sit a bit before adding more detail to make this a more concise and enjoyable watch for you. But please bear in mind that there's even more times that eclipsed during the process. But okay, so first here, I knew I wanted to start with her fins because this was always where my main idea stemmed from, was making her fins look like Mother of Pearl, or at least imitate that visually. So I've got a base color dark blue here, and normally I would actually let that dry and then add another coat on top of that to make it much darker. This is a singular coat, and you can see a lot of texture to this paint because most of the color from her plastic is showing through. Echo, in this case, has a very shiny plastic. The different characters and their different plastics actually do impact how the paint adheres to the figure. And so the biggest reason to have a base coat down, nice and simple dark blue, is to give a better adhesive surface. In fact, a lot of the little spaces at the very base of her fin where it connects to her body, the paint pulled away from that because they were sort of rounded, and I had to go back over and add in another layer and then a final layer over top of that. So what you see going on now is I'm starting to add in some of the stripes, and it's a little harder to see because of the texturing underneath. Right now I'm focused on testing out the colors. You can see I've got 4 different colors going on there. The more teal green blue above the pink on my palette there, I decided I actually didn't like that one as much. It made the visual too cluttered, so I never actually went back to that color. And that's just something you have to accept as an artist, is that you aren't going to use all that you think you might. I have, to the side out of frame, about a dozen bottles of color, and I only used about 5 of them, maybe more. Black and white, I kind of don't really count if I'm mixing those in, and I do mix colors, but the vast majority of my colors I didn't use. So here I'm taking my, not my thinnest brush, but it is a thinner one, to create the detail rivulets, or veins, whatever you want to call it, but to get that marbled effect of the mother of pearl. It doesn't have to be exact. I'm really going through overall appeal rather than perfect imitation, and it gives you that feel. That's a big thing about customs, is not going for a perfect imitation. Go for the right feel. Here I'm actually using white instead of the pink at this point, because pink is such a light color, and especially with a metallic pink, where the metallics have a lot of a translucent formula in them to make the shiny part really shine. It's a good idea to start with a white base for the lighter colors. If you're doing something like a bronze or a blue or a even green, and you want it to have a darker effect to it, using a black base is what I recommend. So using black base or a white base with either of those colors, any metallic really, is always a good idea. So yeah, I'm doing the white, and then I'll do the pink over top. The pink doesn't show super well on camera. It's actually a lot more vivid in person, but that's just any pink or lavender on film. It's at a disadvantage, sadly. So you can see here I'm letting it sit and dry for a bit. I didn't manage to cut this part out. The darker blue, so you can see how much darker that appears on her. That is the exact same color I used for the base coat. That really shows you how important it is to layer your colors. Don't do one and done, unless that's an effect you want. There are exceptions to that rule, but overall, you want to keep adding layers. Now, I want to go ahead and talk a bit about holding the figure. As you've probably noticed, I do not remove my figures from the base before painting them. There are some excellent tutorials, especially from the Skylander dude, on how to do that and do it well, but I do not do that. I don't want to risk damaging the figure. I don't want to add an extra hour of work by pulling them off, and I've found ways to paint them pretty efficiently without pulling them off the base. My goal with my figures is it's not to make them look like this was a factory made, professionally done figure. This is supposed to be a piece of artwork, and I'm okay with that showing. I'm okay with you seeing brush strokes. I'm okay with you seeing that this was hand done. And I'm okay with you seeing little flecks of paint on the base. In fact, every single custom I've ever done has a little bit of paint on the base somewhere, but you never notice because that's not where your eyes go. Your eyes go to the figure. And if it's really big or obtrusive, I'll scrape it off and I'll make it cleaned up a little bit, but overall it's just not something I worry about. The getting to the bellies of creatures and the inner wrists, especially with the dragons, that is always a tricky part, and you'll see later on how I have to move her all over to get to those angles. But typically, as a rule of thumb, if you can see it, your paintbrush can reach it. And you just gotta find the right angle to get in there. Get a big enough blob of paint on your brush, and it won't be as thick of a coat as your outer parts of the dragon, but it won't disrupt the visual cohesion as long as you get a little bit of color there. And so that's my general philosophy. You see it, you reach it, and it ends up looking really good. You don't have to remove a figure from the base. So if that is something holding you back from trying out customs yourself, don't let it. It's actually not so bad. And yeah, the bigger thing I want to talk about though is how to hold the figure even when you're just going on top of the figure. You'll see I'm holding her in all sorts of places. I always stabilize my brush hand. So when I hold the brush, and I'm especially going for those finer details, my middle and my ring finger often find a spot on the dragon or character, whichever one you're doing, to stabilize my hand and get much steadier paint strokes. This is really, really important, and it actually does play a factor of paying attention to what I paint when, so that I will have a dry part to paint. I use acrylic paints, which dry very fast, all things considered, especially when you're applying thinner layers the way I do. And so oftentimes I will have painted parts that are dry, and I just don't mind touching them as I work. I'm careful when I do it. I obviously don't want to scrape them with my nails. Sometimes I do that accidentally and I have to go back and fix it. That's just part of the process. But yeah, having a way to stabilize your hand while painting is pretty important. I'll also do that here. You can't really see it, but I am stabilizing my wrist on the table in this case. Awkward holding positions is just kind of part of the art, and it's kind of fun. So if you give it a try, enjoy. And yes, I absolutely accidentally touch wet parts all the time, and I have to fix it. It's just that it happens. My hands are usually a mess by the time I'm done. You can probably see some on my fingers here and there. But yeah, being able to stabilize your hand is really, really important. So at this point in the video, I am focused on just getting a base color on her whole body. This is not a finalized coat. It looks really nice here on camera because the camera is great at hiding flaws. It's wonderful that way. But at the same time, it is deceptive. And this coat is absolutely not a great look on its own. It's doing a great job at giving that adhesive first layer to let other paint grip on top of it really nicely. But on its own, it is insufficient. Sadly, with textured designs like echoes and then feathers or fur, the paint does tend to glob a little bit more, and it takes longer to dry, so you have to wait longer between coats, which is why you'll see me go between painting her body, then touching up her fins, and going back to her body. I tend to leave the paws closer towards the end, simply because they are one of the harder to reach parts of the dragon, and I usually jump to a smaller brush to get those, and I have to touch a lot more of the top of the figure, and I don't want to accidentally touch wet spots when I do that. Another thing about Echo's body here is because it is a shinier type material, I had to go back a lot and touch up, especially behind her ears, and the way that her seahorse textured skin rises up, and a lot of those rises, it created just little divots that the paint pulled away from. And so I had to go back in a lot of those spots and add just a tiny bit of paint. But going back and making those fixes really matters for the visual cohesion of your figure. Okay, here I'm going and starting to add black to the spines of her fins. That is another thing. So when I first went over and did all the marbling colors for the Mother of Pearl, I didn't worry about going over those. I knew I would go back over with black, but then you do want to go over and give that crisp edges. Getting clean edges on things like spines, and I'll later discuss the eyes, is really important. If a figure looks like it should have a clearly defined separation between two colors, and that is blobby or wobbly or messy in any way, the eye really catches on to that and it pulls your whole custom down. So getting clean edges where it matters is so important. Getting clean edges with all the little waves, that doesn't matter because that is a textured look. It's more of an overall feel than a specific clean pattern. The spines, however, they go against the waves and they stand strong. So having a clean edge really mattered with those ones. So here you see me making a mistake of what I should have done with her figure. So I went ahead and tried out just doing the metallic pink on her ear fin flare down below her horn, and I should have used white first. I knew I should have, but I wanted to see, because this pink metallic ended up being a bit thicker than I initially anticipated, so I was hoping I could get away with just doing layers, but it ended up actually making it worse because metallics are a bit more textured and you don't want any more layers of that than you have to, and I ended up having to just go over with white anyway, and so it made it less clean than it could have been. And so that is something I regret doing, but making mistakes is part of the creative process, so don't be afraid to make them. It happens. You just paint over and keep going on. So here I'm finally getting to the paws, and then in a moment her underbelly. Definitely one of the most tedious parts of any custom, getting to that underside. And you can see me just start turning her upside down, turn her around, trying to find all those odd angles, and it's not the most entertaining thing to watch here on video because I'm trying to find how to get to certain places. There was one part that was really hard to get with one of her back legs, but I managed to make it work. It turned out all right. Okay, this is a fun part here. So I'm doing something called dry brushing. That is where you dip your paintbrush into paint, you wipe off most of the paint, and then you lightly brush it over top of a textured surface. And that is how you highlight all of those ridges and textures in the mold. This is something I really wish they had gone ahead and done with the base design of Echo, because it really makes that fancy design to her pop out, and it is such a satisfying thing to do. You only usually need to do just one layer of dry brushing to make it look good, depending on what you're doing. If you want a much more in-depth or deeper looking texture to something, you could layer your colors and just get lighter and lighter with your brush over top. That can also get pretty messy though. It's a trick you can try with all sorts of things. You paint a solid, darker base or lighter base, and then you go over top with a dry brush, and it just looks so cool, and I'm so happy with how it turned out on this one. Okay, and you can see me getting to her other ear here, where I do in fact go with white first, and you can instantly see that pops so much more. She needed more pink because the pink in her fins was great, but the rest of her body was too dark and too blue. She needed a bit more of a balance to her, which is why I ended up going with pink on her fins. So here you can see I'm starting to get down into the angles that had blank spots under her belly, and you can see how I mentioned it doesn't always look that great on camera, because at this point my head is above where you're seeing on the camera there, and I'm trying to look down in and catch all those little bits where you can noticeably tell her original color is peeking through the darker blue base. So here I'm accepting that I need to just go ahead and do white over top of her ear fin and just go back over with pink later on. Not the best texture, but it's not super noticeable, so it turned out okay in the end. I'm not too upset with how that went. Definitely could have been better. So at this point, one of the biggest problems is that she honestly just has too much blue, and she needed something else to pull it all together. So I grabbed a darker pink and decided to color her cuffs and her collar this darker pink. I did not base coat this because I knew I wanted to keep the color much more dark, because she is a punk girl. I'm not going to take that away from her. And the black showing through that is not such a bad thing in this case. I did have to go over with several layers. This is a thicker metallic paint, but it is still a metallic paint. And unless I had gone back and tried to color match a good pink underneath, I feel like this was the best option. It kept it kind of an interesting texture to it, which I ended up really liking. But yeah, so I decided to go dark pink, and I feel like that really helped pull out the lighter pinks in her fins and her ear flare. Okay, here is something I decided to do, and this was risky because I wasn't sure if I would like it or not. It is not something I had planned on doing, but I really felt like she needed something else on her body, something different, because again, it just was having the same problem as her original figure, where even with all the texturing, it was too subtle and it just kind of got lost. And so I went and highlighted some of the little bumps between the big, I'm not sure what you would call those, the box ridges that a seahorse has. In between those, there's tiny little bumps to add more texture to her. And I went and took again, with doing something like this, what you want to do is you want to get kind of a little dot of paint on the tip of your brush, even like a little bead. And then you just lightly tap it. You aren't really brushing, you're more just tapping the color on. And I really like how this turned out. It's kind of like little stars, but I purposely did not do it to her whole body because this is what she needed. She needed some sort of, not gradient, but differentiation between the different parts of her body. And so I did the speckling on the top, so you can see me doing on her head and her spine, and the forward parts of her arms, and then her hands as well. But not on her lower sides, not on her belly, and the very underside of her tail I left blank too. This creates kind of a journey for your eyes to go on as it travels from this more textured and busy top to a simpler bottom, and that just creates a more overall appealing look to her, which is why I ended up doing this, and I'm so glad it went well. Sometimes you try things like this and it doesn't go well, and you just have to go back and redo some stuff. That is, again, part of the process. I got lucky this time. I'm sure there'll be other custom videos where I don't get so lucky, and you just get to see me redo something that looked so good originally, and then I messed up and then I had to go back and do it again. Here's another try it out and see if I like it moment. I decided to add just a little bit of the darker pink to her shells on her headphone horns. This was something I wasn't sure, but she needed a bit of the darker pink somewhere higher up to help tie it all together. And I ended up just doing it in the grooves of the seashell, and I actually liked how it turned out. The seashell horns themselves, I decided not to paint a different color. I thought I was originally, but they ended up actually being a good color without conflicting with any of the other colors, if that makes sense at all to you guys. The pink helped tie it together as kind of its own thing, and so yeah, I like how it turned out. One of the last things I did here with her was create a different color for her little spikes on her necklace. I knew they couldn't stay silver. The silver was just kind of empty there, and if it had been a strong enough silver on its own, it would have been fine, but that silver really faded into her original color. The original paint job just wasn't quite that good. And I'm really happy with this bright ocean teal I went. It's kind of a unique color. It doesn't have any of that color in the rest of her design, and that actually really worked because this is an accessory of hers. It's not one of her main features, and I actually really like that pop of lighter, I think it really is called like ocean breeze. That ocean teal blue really worked out. Ooh, okay, this is the most important part of any custom, the eyes. If you get the eyes right, it's great. Your whole custom will look so much better. If you make your eyes messy, it will pull your entire character, your entire custom down. The eyes are what people naturally look to. This is part of psychology. Eyes tell you so much about a person. It is a huge aspect of communication, and you always look someone in the eyes. Even if you're shy, when you look at a character, your eyes focus on the eyes. And so if you mess up the eyes, it really reflects on the rest. So you always want to take your time and get clean lines around them. Echo is a little easier here because she already has just thick black eyeliner. She's a girl boss like that. Other characters, you have to if you mess up, you have to color match their face and really, really clean that up. Make it look good. Here I did experiment more. The sclera of the eyes, the iris, that part matters less than clean lines for the pupils and the outline of the eyes. Having a bit more of a messy texture look of the color of the eye itself, that's fine, as long as the outer edges of your eyes really are crisp. I hemmed and hawed on whether or not I wanted to keep it just that super, super pale blue, but I ended up having fun with making it really dragon eye-like. Alright, so here is the final product of the Echo. You guys will have to let me know if it was worth customizing a $120 to $140 figure. I am so happy with how she turned out. She is currently in my shop listed at $160. That is a high price for a reason though. I actually originally listed her at $140, but because there are Echoes listed at $140 on eBay, I actually rose it for a specific reason. So normally I don't like my customs being super overpriced. That is never my goal with these. These are not a way to make money. Goodness knows I have much better ways to make money than painting Skylanders. But I don't want my rare figures underpriced for the sake of having them be bought by someone who wants to just get the figure and not the custom. Because I don't want anybody buying these and then trying to scrape off the paint, because they are not going to have a fun time with that. It's not going to work for them. Trying to clean off this paint is a nightmare, and it'll never look as good as it was originally. These are intended to be customs. They need to be bought as customs, which is why I have to have my prices high on these, as opposed to other customs where I will, if a figure itself is under $30, I could price it between $15 and $20 if I'd gotten it as a gift or something and be content selling it, because I'm not trying to make money. I'm just trying to afford to do this hobby. The really expensive figures are the exception with here in Echo. I don't expect her to ever sell, but if you really want to and you have $160, she is all yours. Go for it. I'm happy with this custom. I'm happy for her to stay in my collection forevermore, and I hope you guys enjoyed seeing the process and hearing me explain a bit of what you gotta do with these customs.